Let me share with you the secrets of painting a portrait in oil by blocking in the main masses, using the example of a portrait of Arkhip Kuindzhi based on a painting by Ivan Kramskoy. We will start our work with the main masses. Basically, if you look at it, there are essentially two main masses. One mass is the face and the other is the hair and beard. And accordingly, I immediately get rid of the white background. One of our main priorities is to cover the white of the canvas, because our eyes perceive everything in relation to what surrounds it. That is, if we paint a portrait on a black canvas, all the colors will seem lighter, brighter. If we paint on a white canvas, all the colors seem very dark, and we subconsciously want to make everything lighter. That's exactly why beginners often end up making portraits and paintings in general more washed out, lighter, and closer to white. I start my work with a very thin consistency, that is, I thin the oil paint with thinner. I use a Malowich odorless thinner, which doesn't contain oil or varnish. This allows the paint to dry fairly quickly, and in one session you can make the painting quite detailed and even multi-layered. Because when you do the first layer quite thin and diluted, it dries very quickly. When you start applying the next layers more thickly, they don't mix much with the background, which allows you to control the process. Also, a very important point, when you work with a brush, keep a rag in your other hand to constantly wipe the brush. Because when we work with a brush on the canvas, we inevitably get the brush dirty. And accordingly, the color we wanted to add disappears. You definitely need to wipe it. The brush must be wiped on a rag and then pick up the color again. So look, while I was telling you all this introduction, I've already outlined the silhouette and, in general, the main features of the face shape. So first we put in the main spots and then we work through contrasts. We lay down the darkest areas and the lightest ones. This is the simplest approach because you can see these contrasts clearly. The most difficult thing in a portrait is the halftones. The most difficult thing is to find the exact tonal relationships. And of course, it's not easy to find the exact proportions either. But nowadays, proportions can always be checked using various digital devices like a phone or a tablet. So in general, it's easier to correct that now, or rather, it's easier to check yourself. But tonal relationships are essentially first and foremost your experience in painting portraits. I mean, not just portraits, but paintings in general. So the more you practice, the more you paint, the more you will see, the more accurately you will see tonal relationships, and the more subtly you will perceive them. After laying down the main spots, I established the strongest contrasts, the lightest and darkest areas. I shaded the eye sockets, the shadow under the nose, and the lips. When laying in the main shapes of the face, you can be guided by a basic proportion here. This face is divided into roughly 3 parts, from the forehead, from the place where the hairline begins, to the eyebrows. From the eyebrows to the base of the nose, and from the base of the nose to the chin, like this. On average, about 3 equal parts. There are different viewing angles, and people have different facial features. Some have large foreheads, others have big chins, and so on. But knowing this proportion, you can see what type of face you have and accordingly roughly convey it on the canvas. I've laid out, look, the main things, the main shapes for now, roughly. That is, the eyes are blocked in as one shape, the eyebrows, the nose. Everything is still simple for now, but already more tonally accurate than at the beginning. And already at the beginning, I start adding cool tones. By the way, I started the work entirely with warm ones. It's much easier because, first of all, it's much easier to correct warm tones, and secondly, they're closer to the final look of our portrait. So, after that, I start adding cool tones. For example, I added a bit of blue to the eyebrow and a little green somewhere else. At the initial stage, add all these shades more boldly, in greater amounts. Because as you refine the work, they will definitely be reduced and become less noticeable. That's why it's important to work more boldly at the beginning, to add more shades, more of everything that might not even be visible, like greens, blues, and so on. Well, and then, look, I've already started refining the tone on the face, meaning I've added more pinks, darker tones. So, initially, our tone which seemed dark at first. Once we laid in all the dark areas around it, it already became too light. That's why I darkened it again by adding cool tones. Cool shades are simply essential, they just add richness to the face. They are generally present on the face, but for example, I often enhance them in my work. That is the greenish tones, they're kind of peachy greenish, so to speak. So it's the skin color plus a greenish shade. That's what's really there. I add even more green there. Somewhere I add more blue, more purple, even where essentially they don't really exist. But the point is, even if you want to make a realistic portrait, at first you can add this more boldly. And then gradually, as you refine the tones, you'll still be blending them in, you'll be clarifying the color, and they will decrease. Well, somewhere they'll show through, and that'll look really great. So, we've had, oh, this is a video. What's great about this video? You might notice that I'm not speeding up the process. Absolutely nowhere. And I didn't cut anything out. Well, except for maybe a couple of strokes here and there that mean absolutely nothing. I only cut out the moments when my brush goes off screen to pick up more paint. I cut out all those moments. I cut out several hours for you, so it wouldn't be so boring for you to watch for a long time. This portrait took me about an hour and 15 minutes. That's what was on camera. I also did some extra work off camera, so it took about 2 hours total. That's quite a lot. Well, for a YouTube video, of course, watching something like that would probably take a long time. Only those who are really eager to learn will probably be able to watch such videos. 15 minutes would be enjoyable to watch for many, even for people who won't be following along to learn it themselves. So, if you suddenly decide to follow along with my work, you can just pause the video as needed. You can slow down the speed, basically, whatever is comfortable for you. So, watch it at your own pace. Actually, what I wanted to say is why I brought up the topic of time. What you just saw in the video took about 8 minutes. And I've already painted the portrait. In reality, it probably took about 30 minutes. Yeah, about 30 minutes, I think, no more. Because these initial stages are faster. After that, clarifications and details take much more time. Usually, when I edit a short 1-minute video, it turns out that the first part of the portrait, which I painted in about 10 or 15 minutes, takes up about 40 seconds in the video. And all the rest of the time, maybe a few hours, fits into just 20 seconds in this short video. Because at that point, it's already very subtle work. I mean, small movements, additions, corrections. Now you can see the stages begin with a fine brush. Refinements, additions. In this portrait, my task was to get as close to the original as possible. I didn't try to overblend him too much or make him too, boring. But in terms of colors, tones, shapes, and likeness, I tried to get as close as possible. That's why I work a lot with a fine brush and a medium brush. But if I were, for example, just doing a portrait from a photo, like one I do for myself, then of course I almost always work. I use a large brush and I use a small brush just a little bit for some accents. I'm not really fond of details. I like to convey character and energy in a big, sweeping way. Well, I think you've already seen that in my works. Well, at this stage, the work is basically the most important, I guess. Well, how should I put it? Important. So how does it work? At first, we lay the foundation, the base, kind of like a groundwork, and basically the tonal relationship. This, of course, is important overall for likeness, for composition, for tone. Right. And what about the final stage? Why is it important? It's more complicated, at least for me. Because there's a lot. You want and need to add details, precision. It's a very meticulous job. It's calmer, more focused. And some of these details, they can add character, add depth, and of course, realism. I wanted to say this stage is the most important, but actually it probably isn't. All stages are important. Each one is important in its own way. Probably it's different for different tasks. In my case, this final stage was very important because I wanted to show you that precision. And to show that using blocks of color you can create any portrait with any level of accuracy, you can make it broad and abstract, that is, more abstract, just to convey emotion or a state. Or you can do it like this, detailed, precise, realistic. Moreover, you can go even further with this portrait towards hyperrealism if you want. That's really not for me. I stick to the style of the Peredvizhniki, meaning realism. When you look from a distance, it's almost like a photo. But up close, when you look, there are big brush strokes, movement, and the colors are quite striking, noticeable, bright. In general, I really love this. What else can I say in this video? Probably to tell you that I now have a new training format called mentoring. I basically have an online course with more than 50 training videos starting from simple ones and going up to more advanced ones. But now it feels like it's really hard for people. It's become harder to concentrate and learn on their own. To study basically all these videos, to work on your own with information. And accordingly, I started doing online mentoring since last year. So basically online guidance for a person. The beauty here is that we decide what we are going to do, what we are going to draw. The subject matter and style are based on the person's needs. First of all, it's an individual approach because everyone has their own desires, their own abilities, their own taste, their own style. And accordingly, first of all, a person needs to understand for themselves what they want to do. That's it. Well, as for me, I understand how I can help. And the process is that basically we choose, for example, different subjects. The student paints these subjects and he sends them to me at different stages, at different steps, showing what he has so far. Accordingly, I give him feedback on them. Sometimes I make videos using a tablet. I show how things can be corrected, added, or changed. And accordingly, I send it to the student. He gets feedback, then he works on the next stage. This approach, overall, has proven itself to be effective, and for me as well, it was important for me to understand whether I would find it interesting, and whether I would be able to provide the same value as I do in person classes. And overall, I can say that there is a result, a very good one in fact. Of course, it always depends on the student and their motivation, but when we stay in touch, I think there's always more motivation than just on their own. So if you're interested, feel free to write to me with questions. We can make the format quite flexible so that there are different lengths, different subjects, and so on. In general, all of this is possible. To be continued. We'll somehow find some broadly useful directions. Things are nearing the finale. I just have a few details left. I hope you found the video interesting and useful. If you decide to follow along with this video, to learn for yourself, be sure to send me your results either in private messages or tag me on social media. Let me know how it turned out for you, what result you got. It would be interesting to see. Anyway, thank you very much for your attention. I'll leave you alone now for these last 10 seconds or so. Good luck, and I wish you success in your creative work.